Saint Catherine of Siena was favored by visions of her guardian angel and Jesus and Mary themselves on an almost daily basis. But with these favors came the visits and temptations that the devil gave her. Though there were times he caused her much grief, she also learned to not give him his reward, which would be her anxiety, worry, and fear. Instead, she laughed at him, and she even gave him a nickname, Pickpocket, because he would snatch away so many souls. Blessed Raymond, her confessor, tells us that many times the devil would throw Catherine into the fire because he was angry that she was always snatching so many souls away from him. This would scare her friends, who were almost always with her, and they would scream with fear every time she suddenly fell into the fire. But each time she would get up unharmed, dusting herself off with a smile. "Don't be afraid of old Pickpocket," she would say. Another time, as they made their way from Rome back to Siena, the devil repeatedly began to throw Catherine off her donkey. The first time, she was suddenly thrown headfirst down a ravine. Of course, her friends were screaming and afraid, convinced that Catherine was seriously hurt or dead. But when they found her, she was lying on her back, laughing as if it had been a good joke. She said, "Just a blow from Pickpocket." She got back onto her donkey, and they were off again. But not too much later, she was thrown off the donkey and into a mud puddle, this time with the donkey thrown on top of her. But Catherine refused to give the pickpocket what he wanted. She joked, "This donkey is warming up the side that's always hurting me." Her friends begged her not to get back on the donkey again, so Catherine walked the rest of the way back to town, leading her donkey. But the devil continued his harassment by pulling and yanking on her one way and then the other. It was only by her friends, who had to hold on to her on each side, that she wasn't thrown down. But all this time, Catherine merely laughed and giggled at his vain attempts, giving him the mockery he deserved. Her friends never could see the humor of the situation, but learned much from Catherine's great faith in God. Not everything was funny, though. The last 2 years of Catherine's life were particularly hard. Though she died at the young age of 33, her body was worn out from the harsh penances and journeys she imposed on herself. She would often travel to Rome to counsel the Pope, who was living in Avignon, France, rather than Rome. When he had at last moved back to Rome to live as he should have been, Catherine's joy was cut short. The Church had suffered a schism of a conflict between two parties. One was in support of the French-dominated clergy, and the other in support of the Romans. In 1378, the French cardinals eventually elected an anti-pope. This grieved Catherine very much, and she moved to Rome for a few months to win the influential secular rulers to the side of the true pope. While there, she experienced the wrath of the devil, who she was convinced was seeking retaliation of her good work. She describes this in a letter. "The terror of demons began in such a way that it utterly stupefied me. Mad with rage against me, that I, a worm, had been the means of tearing away from their hands what they for a long time had possessed in the Holy Church. So great was my terror and bodily pain that I wanted to fly from the study and go into the chapel, as though the study had caused the pain. I rose up, therefore, and being unable to walk, I leaned upon my friend Barduccio. But I was immediately flung down, and lying there, it seemed to me that my soul had left my body, but not in the way that had once happened to me when I had tasted the bliss of the immortals. No, this was quite different. Barduccio thought she was dead. However, she was alive, but paralyzed by the demons that continued to assail her, making her appear to be dead. She began to pray inwardly for help, not just for herself, but also for the church and its situation. She heard God tell her that he would answer her prayers, and the terror of the demons began to subside, and she slowly came to. Her friends carried her to her room to recover, but here another battle awaited for her. The demons had come back and tried to convince her that she was actually one of them. She writes, "When they carried me upstairs, the room seemed full of demons, who began to wage another battle against me, the most terrible that I have ever endured, striving to make me believe that I was not she in the body, but rather an impure spirit. I then called on the divine aid with sweet tenderness. For 2 days and 2 nights, this battle continued. The assault on her mind was lifted, but the diabolical attacks on her body continued. On the feast of the Purification of Mary, when she was at Mass, God revealed to her that through her suffering, she was doing as the martyrs did when shedding their blood. She commented to someone that she hoped to be able to witness the healing of the schism of the Church, because, as she put it, her life was hanging on by a thread. This proved to be true, as she barely made it into the next year. During Lent at Mass one day, she collapsed and had to be carried out. Part of her torment was that she believed that somehow she was responsible for the division of the Church. She eventually became paralyzed from the waist down, and it wasn't too long after that she died in the suffering. However, so many miracles happened as people viewed her body that it was apparent that she won her battle with the devil, the pickpocket, who did not get to snatch away her soul. St. Ignatius of Loyola also battled Satan many times in his life. These attacks were ongoing and witnessed by many people around him. One member of the society said he was convinced of Ignatius' sanctity because the devil always stayed with him, hounding him and persecuting him. He said, when the members of the society were together without Father Ignatius, there was tranquility and peace, but upon his arrival, the devil, out of hatred for him, aroused some trouble or storm. The devil hated him so much, in fact, that one time, when the devil invaded the body of a teenage boy, he was told that they would get a priest to drive the demon out. Immediately, the demon, through the boy, began to shriek that it not be Ignatius to drive him out, for he considered Ignatius his greatest enemy in the world. The most amazing stories of Ignatius' power over the devil, however, are not when Ignatius was alive, but after his death. These next stories that you will hear are the testimonies given for his canonization process. 4 noble women who were known and admired for their great piety became possessed by the devil, who took over their bodies. This possession started off with bizarre illnesses and disorders, which would suddenly take them from a healthy state to the brink of death. These disorders couldn't be cured by doctors, who didn't understand them anyway, but only by holy water or oil. Other times, they were greatly tempted to do self-harm. They would bash their head against the wall or ground until someone ran to help them. One time, one of the women named Lodovica was compelled to throw herself off the roof of her house. Her husband, who had followed her, was able to stop her, but the devil then threw her so hard on the ground that she lay on the floor as if dead. Before the possession, the women had found great peace in praying, but now it was impossible to pray. When they tried to go to Mass, they would end up fainting as soon as it began, and they would need to be carried out. If they tried to go to confession, they would lose control of their speech and would assail the priest with blasphemous words and things they would normally never say. These devils would also cause the women to do lewd and impure things against their modesty, which hurt and embarrassed them greatly. Exorcisms were conducted, but no priest was able to free the women from the demons. One day, the women's confessor had the inspiration to hang a picture of St. Ignatius in the room where the women were. Immediately, the devils inside them began to reveal who they were and curse the saint whose picture they saw. They screamed at the confessor for bringing the picture of their enemy. One of the demons left the woman's body, and she lay on the floor half dead. When she came to, she said she saw in a vision of St. Ignatius, who encouraged her and promised her deliverance. The demons continued to refuse to leave the bodies of the women, forcing the women to crawl on the floor on all fours, with their knees bound tightly together. Through the women, they revealed many things that took place in other countries and spoke in languages the women didn't know. They recognized holy relics. This was shown by their bodies suddenly swelling and then unswelling, as well as other strange phenomena. The women were taken to Our Lady of Reggio, St. Agatha of Sabora, and St. Germinano, all churches famous for demonic deliverances. However, not even these churches helped the women. It was soon realized that God desired that the women be delivered by St. Ignatius himself, and the women promised to fast on his vigil if delivered. A relic of St. Ignatius was secretly brought into the house, but the demons immediately announced its presence. They said that he who could drive them out had now entered the house. One of the worst of the demons, who had said before that he would not leave the body of the woman, even if it were Ignatius to tell him, suddenly began to tremble and said, "Ah, but it's not so, for there goes a flame from his mouth that burns me. St. Ignatius drives me away." Then he was forced to say they would soon see many other miracles from St. Ignatius, for Ignatius's canonization was coming soon. With that, he fled from the woman's body. One other demon, who had mocked and abused the saint and ridiculed the other demons for fleeing, threw the knees of the woman before the holy relic of the crown of thorns, saying, "I leave this body through the virtue of this thorn, but not because of Ignatius, who doesn't possess such power." But then he let out a horrible shriek, and he fell down before the picture of St. Ignatius. His mouth forced down to the ground, he said, "Whether or not I want to, I'm forced to confess. It's Ignatius who throws me out." The other demons as well tried to say they were leaving the body for other reasons or other saints that were casting them out, but they too were forced to admit it was Ignatius that was sending them back to hell. One of them cried out, "Where, O Lucifer, is your power? Here you are destroyed by a piece of paper with the picture of this priest on it, and you have no force to resist." Another one screamed, "O God, you have stripped us of our glory to give it to a lame, wrinkled old priest." Eventually, the women were completely freed from the demons. There are many other stories of how St. Ignatius fought the devil from above and freed many souls from their captors. But now, we must talk about St. Teresa of Avila and how she too fought the devil. St. Teresa is well known for her quick wit and humor, as well as her deep wisdom. When she first started the Carmelite order, the other sisters, who enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, felt that she was too strict. To inspire and guide them, St. Teresa wrote several works which is still used today, one of them being The Interior Castle, which was inspired by a vision she saw. Teresa's counsel of Satan's trickery is less dramatic than being thrown down ravines or driving out demons, and it's more about the warfare that Christians experience on a day-to-day basis, sometimes without even realizing it. For instance, Teresa wrote about how the devil loves to trick us with false humility, thinking that we are being humble, but being proud instead. It is necessary to understand what kind of humility this should be, because Satan, I believe, does great harm. He hinders those who seek a deeper prayer life by making them think it is prideful to have spiritual desires, to wish to imitate the saints, and to long for martyrdom. He tells us right off, or makes us think, that the actions of the saints are to be admired, not to be imitated by us who are sinners. At times, St. Teresa suffered from the temptation to stop praying for fear of offending God. She began to understand her own smallness and wickedness, and instead of being inspired to pray more, she felt that because she was wicked, she shouldn't pray at all. She writes, "In this matter, the devil turned his big artillery on me, and I suffered so much because I thought it showed a lack of humility if I persevered in prayer when I was so wicked. So I gave up praying for at least a year. But doing this was only throwing myself down into hell, nor could it have been otherwise. There is no need for any demons to drag me there." Although much of what Teresa experienced were interior battles, she also experienced exterior battles as well. She writes, "I was in the oratory when Satan, in a horrible shape, appeared at my left hand. I looked at his mouth in particular because when he spoke it was horrible. A huge flame seemed to issue from his body, perfectly bright without any shadow. He spoke in a fearful way, telling me that, though I had escaped out of his hands, he would get a hold of me again. I was in a great fright, making the sign of the cross as well as I could, and then the form vanished, but it reappeared instantly. This happened twice. I did not know what to do. There was some holy water at hand. I took some and threw it at the figure, and then Satan never returned again." St. Teresa tells of another time when Satan tried to distract her from praying. "Once on the night of All Souls, I was in the oratory. I was saying some devotional prayers at the end of our breviary when Satan put himself on the book before me to prevent me from finishing my prayer. I made the sign of the cross, and he went away. I then returned to my prayer, and he too came back. He did this 3 times, and I wasn't able to finish the prayer without throwing holy water on him. When I did this, I saw at that moment certain souls come out from purgatory. They must have been on the point of their deliverance. Perhaps Satan, I thought, might have been in this way trying to delay the release by hindering my prayer. And one last story of how St. Teresa saw Jesus in the sacred host with demons right next to the priest. Once, when I was going to communion, I saw with the eyes of the soul, more distinctly than those of the body, 2 demons of most hideous shape. Their horns seemed to pierce the throat of the poor priest. I beheld my Lord in that great majesty of which I have spoken, held in the hands of that priest, in the host that he was about to give me. It was plain that those hands were those of a sinner, and I felt that the soul of that priest must be in mortal sin. What must it be, O my Lord, to look upon shapes so hideous? The 2 demons were so intimidated and frightened by your presence that they seemed as if they would have willingly run away, had you but given them permission. I was so troubled by this vision that I don't know how I was able to receive communion. I was also in great fear, for I thought that if the vision was truly from God, then he wouldn't have let me see the evil state of that soul. Our Lord told me to pray for that priest. He said he had allowed this vision so that I may understand the power of the words of the consecration and how God didn't fail to be truly present in the host, no matter how wicked the priest might be who uttered those words. He also wanted me to see his great goodness and that he places himself in the very hands of his enemy for my good and for the good of all.